I'm Ryan Morgan, 34, a software developer who spent 12 years climbing the corporate ladder while saving every penny. Last month, I finally bought my dream home in a beautiful neighborhood after sacrificing vacations and luxuries. Yesterday, my younger brother Derek showed up unannounced, called me a loser who got lucky, and demanded I give him my house because I don't deserve nice things anyway. The audacity left me speechless. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from. Please like and subscribe to follow my journey of standing up to family toxicity and learning self-respect. Growing up in Portland, our family looked normal from the outside. My parents worked hard, Dad as a manager at a local manufacturing company, Mom as an elementary school teacher. They provided for us materially, but emotional availability was never their strong suit. The 5-year age gap between Derek and me created a natural distance, but it was the clear favoritism that truly separated us. From an early age, Derek displayed an entitlement that my parents never challenged. When he was 7, he broke my science fair project the night before judging. Instead of consequences, my parents told me, "You should have kept it where he couldn't reach it." That became the recurring theme. Derek acted out, and somehow, it was my responsibility to accommodate his behavior. I was the quiet, studious kid who preferred reading and tinkering with our family's first computer. Derek was outgoing and athletic, qualities my parents valued more visibly. At family gatherings, they'd enthusiastically describe Derek's Little League home runs while mentioning my straight A's as an afterthought, if at all. My teenage years were especially difficult. While I struggled with acne and social awkwardness, Derek effortlessly collected friends and girlfriends. Our house frequently filled with his teammates and popular crowd, while I retreated to my room to code or read. My interest in computers was dismissed as just playing games, despite my learning actual programming skills. "Ryan needs to get out more," my mom would say within my earshot. "Derek has such natural social skills." I remember one family dinner when I was 16 and Derek was 11. I'd just won a regional programming competition, and I made the mistake of mentioning it. "That's nice," Dad said without looking up from his plate. "Did you see Derek's soccer trophy? Coach says he might make the traveling team next year." Derek smirked at me. "Nobody cares about computer nerds, Ryan. That's why you don't have any friends." Instead of correcting him, my parents changed the subject to Derek's upcoming tournament. The message was clear: his achievements mattered more than mine. When I received a scholarship to study computer science at University of Washington, my parents seemed more concerned about who would help Derek with his homework than proud of my accomplishment. The day they drove me to college, they cut the trip short because Derek had a scrimmage game they didn't want to miss. Throughout college, I called home weekly. Half of every conversation revolved around Derek's activities and needs. When I shared my struggles with difficult classes or tight finances, my parents offered quick platitudes before returning to more pressing matters, usually Derek-related. Meanwhile, Derek struggled academically. His high school experience consisted of skipped classes, minimum effort, and banking on sports that never materialized into the scholarships my parents assumed would come. When he barely graduated, my parents threw him an extravagant party. For my college graduation with honors, they sent a card that arrived 3 days late. Despite everything, I held on to the hope that working hard and proving myself would eventually earn their recognition. I believed success would speak for itself. I couldn't have been more wrong. By the time I finished college, I developed a pattern of seeking validation through achievement, while simultaneously believing I didn't deserve recognition. This contradiction followed me into adulthood, creating a cycle of working harder than anyone else while feeling perpetually inadequate, especially around my family. Looking back, I can see how these early experiences shaped both Derek and me. He learned that charm and manipulation would get him what he wanted, while I learned that even exceptional effort might not be enough to be valued. These lessons would collide dramatically years later when both our paths reached unexpected crossroads. College became my escape and opportunity. At University of Washington, I found myself among peers who respected intellectual curiosity and technical skills. For the first time, my aptitude for programming wasn't weird, it was valuable. Financial reality hit quickly. My scholarship covered tuition but little else. While many classmates enjoyed the full college experience, I juggled classes with a part-time job at the campus IT help desk. Weekends weren't for parties but for picking up extra shifts at a local electronics store. "You're missing the point of college," my roommate Justin would say before heading out on Friday nights. "It's about networking and connections too." He wasn't wrong, but I didn't have that luxury. Every dollar mattered. I ate ramen more often than I care to remember and bought textbooks used or shared them with classmates. During holidays when dorms closed, I couldn't always afford the flight home, so I stayed with friends or took extra shifts. When I graduated in 2011, the job market was still recovering from the recession. I sent out 127 applications before landing an entry-level IT support role at a healthcare software company. The pay was modest, but it offered stability and potential for growth. My first apartment was a 400-square-foot studio with a kitchenette and a view of the building's air conditioning units. The furniture consisted of items found on Craigslist and a mattress on the floor. But it was mine, the first space that truly belonged to me. While Derek bounced between jobs back home, I created a disciplined life. Each month, I allocated my paycheck meticulously: rent, utilities, student loans, groceries, and savings. The savings category remained sacred even when it meant saying no to dinners out or new clothes. Professional growth came through deliberate effort. I volunteered for projects nobody wanted, stayed late to learn new systems, and completed certifications on weekends. Within 3 years, I moved from support to junior developer, a significant step toward my goals. During these years, visits home revealed the widening gap between Derek's reality and mine. He'd gotten a job at a sporting goods store but quit after arguing with the manager. He worked briefly at our uncle's construction company but left because the hours were too early. Each time I visited, he had a new excuse and a new plan that never materialized. "Not everyone can be boring and obsessed with work like you," he'd say when I suggested job training programs. "Some of us actually want to enjoy life." In my 6th year at the company, I met Hannah at a work conference. She was smart, driven, and understood my devotion to building a stable future. Unlike my family, she saw my work ethic as admirable rather than excessive. Our relationship progressed naturally, each of us supporting the other's goals. "I've never met someone who knows exactly what they want and works so consistently to get it," she told me after meeting my family for the first time. "They don't see how remarkable that is." Her words were a balm against my family's continued dismissal. At a holiday gathering that year, I mentioned a significant promotion to senior developer. My father nodded distractedly while my mother immediately pivoted to Derek's new interest in real estate, a career consisting of watching HGTV shows and talking about houses he might someday flip. By year 8, I had advanced to lead developer, nearly tripling my starting salary. Hannah and I moved in together, renting a nice 2-bedroom apartment, but continuing to live below our means. The house fund grew steadily, approaching a respectable down payment. We discussed marriage but agreed to wait until we had our own home. "I want us to start our life together on solid ground," I explained, and Hannah understood completely. For nearly a decade, I maintained this course, working diligently, advancing professionally, saving consistently. No vacations beyond occasional weekend trips. No luxury purchases. No deviation from the plan. Some friends called it excessive, but the security of watching that savings account grow outweighed any temporary pleasure. In spring 2023, after months of searching, we found it, a 4-bedroom craftsman on a quiet street with mature trees and a backyard perfect for the family we hoped to have. The inspection went well, our offer was accepted, and the mortgage approval came through based on our excellent credit and substantial down payment. The day I received the keys remains one of the most emotional moments of my life. Standing in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt a wave of pride and accomplishment wash over me. 12 years of sacrifice had manifested into something tangible. proof that consistency and discipline could overcome even the self-doubt ingrained since childhood. "We did it," I whispered to Hannah as we walked through our home for the first time. "We actually did it." For once, I allowed myself to feel deserving of success. I had earned this, every square foot, every architectural detail, every moment of pride. What I didn't realize was how quickly that pride would become a target for those who hadn't made the same choices. While I was building my career in Seattle, Derek's life in Portland followed a predictable pattern of false starts and abandoned opportunities. After barely graduating high school, he enrolled in community college with dreams of becoming a sports therapist, a plan that lasted exactly 3 weeks before he decided classes were too boring and dropped out. His employment history became a revolving door of service jobs, none lasting more than a few months. He worked at a gym until he stopped showing up for early shifts. He tried bartending but couldn't resist drinking with customers. He sold cars briefly until his manager caught him exaggerating features to make sales. Each failure came with excuses rather than reflection. The managers were all power-tripping losers, he'd explained to our parents, who nodded sympathetically and helped him pay his bills until he found something better suited to his talents. Derek's personal life mirrored his professional instability. He dated a series of women, each relationship more volatile than the last. He'd move in with someone after knowing them for weeks, then call home needing money for a security deposit when it inevitably fell apart. One girlfriend kicked him out after catching him texting his ex. Another left when she realized he'd been borrowing money from her wallet. Despite his mounting failures, Derek maintained an outward confidence that bordered on delusion. He drove a leased BMW he couldn't afford, wore designer clothes purchased on credit cards, and cultivated an Instagram presence that suggested success his bank account didn't reflect. "Image is everything," he once told me during a rare phone call. "People treat you based on what they think you have, not what you actually have." This philosophy extended to his spending habits. While I saved for my future, Derek lived perpetually in the moment. He bought the latest iPhone on release day while behind on rent. He took spontaneous weekend trips to Las Vegas that drained his accounts. He joined expensive gyms and never went. Each financial decision dug him deeper into trouble. The contrast between our paths became impossible to ignore, especially for Derek. Every milestone I reached, promotions, savings goals, homeownership discussions, seemed to trigger a new crisis in his life. The timing was rarely coincidental. When I called home to share news about a significant bonus, my mother cut me off mid-sentence because Derek had just had his car repossessed and needed immediate help. When Hannah and I announced we were house hunting, Derek suddenly needed emergency dental surgery not covered by insurance. My achievements became footnotes to Derek's emergencies. The inevitable crash came 3 years ago. After missing rent payments for 4 consecutive months, Derek was evicted from his apartment. The same week, his latest girlfriend ended their relationship, taking the furniture they purchased together. With nowhere else to go, he moved back into our parents' house at age 29. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement became permanent. Derek occupied his old bedroom, contributed minimally to household expenses, and treated our aging parents like personal assistants. Dad, now retired with heart problems, still mowed the lawn while Derek played video games inside. Mom, working reduced hours due to arthritis, still cooked and cleaned for him. "He's going through a rough patch," Mom would say when I expressed concern. "Not everyone has your stability, Ryan." That rough patch stretched into years. Derek worked sporadically as a food delivery driver, earning just enough to maintain his cell phone and social life while our parents covered his car insurance, medical bills, and daily expenses. When I suggested he develop marketable skills, I became the villain for not understanding his unique challenges. The resentment Derek felt toward me grew more apparent with each passing year. When I visited home, he'd make cutting remarks about selling out to corporate America, or being boring and conventional. He'd interrogate me about my salary and savings, then twist my answers to paint me as either financially irresponsible or pathetically frugal. Must be nice to have everything handed to you, he said during one particularly tense dinner, ignoring the decades of work that had built my career. My parents' enabling reached new heights when they borrowed against their retirement to help Derek start a business, a vague plan to buy and sell collectible sneakers online. The venture lasted 2 months before he lost interest, but the money was gone. When I gently suggested they consult a financial advisor before making such decisions, they accused me of not supporting family. Your brother needs help right now, Dad said. Someday you might need help too. The implication was clear. My independence was viewed not as achievement but as a temporary state that would inevitably fail. In their minds, Derek's dependency wasn't a problem to solve but a natural family dynamic to maintain. By the time Hannah and I found our house, Derek had been living with our parents for over 3 years with no plans to leave. His resentment toward me had calcified into something darker, a belief that my success somehow caused his failure, that I had taken more than my fair share from some cosmic allotment of good fortune. I didn't realize then how dangerous that belief would become when combined with entitlement and desperation. I was about to learn that lesson in the most personal way possible. The weeks after closing on our house were filled with excitement and exhaustion. Hannah and I spent evenings painting walls and weekends assembling furniture. We created a home office where I could work remotely 2 days a week and transformed the smallest bedroom into Hannah's reading nook. Each decision, from wall colors to cabinet hardware, felt significant. This was our home, built on our terms. Simultaneously, we were planning our long-awaited wedding. After a decade together, we'd set a date for fall, envisioning a ceremony in our new backyard surrounded by close friends and family. Hannah had found a dress, we'd interviewed caterers, and the guest list was nearly finalized. Everything was falling into place exactly as we'd planned. I'd shared photos of the house in our family group chat, receiving enthusiastic responses from aunts and cousins but notably brief acknowledgments from my parents, and nothing from Derek. I wasn't surprised. I'd long since adjusted my expectations for family validation, but Hannah encouraged me to keep the door open. They're still your family, she reminded me. Give them the chance to be happy for you. So when my doorbell rang unexpectedly on a Saturday morning and I saw Derek through the peephole, I suppressed my initial wariness and welcomed him in. Hannah was visiting her sister in Portland, leaving me alone to host this impromptu reunion. So this is the famous house, Derek said, stepping into the foyer and looking around with exaggerated appreciation. Not bad, bro. Not bad at all. He wandered through the living room, running his hand along the mantel, peering out windows, opening closet doors without asking. I followed awkwardly, oscillating between pride in showing off our home and discomfort with his scrutiny. Thanks for coming by, I said, attempting warmth. Can I get you something to drink? We just got the kitchen organized. Sure, whatever you've got. He continued exploring while I grabbed 2 beers from the refrigerator. When I returned, Derek was examining our wedding planning binder on the dining table. So you're really doing this, huh? Settling down in suburbia with a picket fence and everything. That's the plan? I replied, handing him a beer. We're excited about it. For 20 minutes, the conversation maintained a superficial pleasantness. Derek asked about the neighborhood, commented on the hardwood floors, and mentioned a similar house he might buy once my investment portfolio hits the right point. I nodded along, knowing his investment portfolio was fictional but unwilling to provoke conflict. The shift happened mid-sentence. Derek was admiring the backyard view when his tone suddenly changed. You know, it's funny how things work out, he said, his voice hardening. You've always had it easy. The comment so directly contradicted reality that I laughed, assuming he was joking. Easy? I've been working 60-hour weeks for over a decade. Playing with computers in an air-conditioned office? Try real work sometime. He took a long drink. Besides, you got all the good genes. The brains. The focus. Whatever. Some of us have to work twice as hard to get half as far. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest that accompanied conversations with my family, the sense that we were operating in parallel realities. Derek, I literally put myself through college working 2 jobs. Nothing was handed to me. Right, Mr. Scholarship. Some of us weren't teachers' pets. He set his beer down forcefully. You know what your problem is? You think you're better than everyone. Better than me. But you're just a lucky loser who happened to pick a field that pays well. The conversation was derailing rapidly, following the familiar pattern of Derek's insecurity transforming into aggression. Normally, I would have de-escalated, changed the subject, done anything to avoid confrontation. But something about him attacking me in my own home, the home I'd sacrificed for years to obtain, sparked an unfamiliar resistance. I think it's time for you to leave, I said quietly. Actually, I came here to talk about something specific. Derek leaned against the counter, his posture suddenly casual despite the tension. I'm thinking we should trade places for a while. What are you talking about? It's simple. You let me move in here, and you can stay with Hannah until the wedding. You're probably staying at her place half the time anyway. The absurdity of the suggestion rendered me momentarily speechless. You want me to give you my house? The house I just bought? Is this a joke? Not give, loan. For a year or 2 max. I need a fresh start, away from Mom and Dad. You've always been the stable one. You can afford to rent a place temporarily. Absolutely not. That's completely unreasonable. Derek's face darkened. You don't deserve this place anyway. You know that, right? You think you earned it because you saved some money and signed some papers? Do you know how many people work just as hard as you and never get ahead? It's all luck, and you're hoarding it. The accusation struck deeper than I wanted to admit. For years, I'd battled the nagging sense that I didn't deserve success, a feeling cultivated by my family's lifelong messaging. But something about Derek's entitled demand crystallized a new perspective. This wasn't about deserving, it was about boundaries. This conversation is over, I said firmly. I worked for this house. I saved for this house. I'm not giving it to you because you can't get your life together. Derek's face contorted with rage. Always the perfect son, right? Let me tell you something. Mom and Dad are getting older, and guess who's been there for them? Not you off in your perfect little life. The least you could do is help your family when we need it. I've offered to help them plenty of times. They always say they're fine. Well, they're not fine. And when I tell them how you're refusing to help your own brother, they're going to see exactly what kind of person you really are. He grabbed his keys. You've got a week to think about it. After that, things get complicated for everyone. He slammed the door behind him, leaving me standing in the kitchen of my dream home, feeling as though the foundation had suddenly become unstable. My hands shook as I called Hannah, who answered on the first ring. He wants what? She asked after I explained what happened. That's completely delusional. I know, but he's serious. And now he's threatening to turn my parents against me. Your parents are adults who can make their own judgments, Hannah said, though we both knew they consistently sided with Derek. We are not giving up our home. Period. Her certainty steadied me, but that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the guilt Derek had so expertly leveraged. What if I was selfish? What if my success did come at someone else's expense? The rational part of me recognized these thoughts as products of long-term manipulation, but they lingered nonetheless, poisoning my achievement with doubt. I didn't realize then that Derek's demand was just the opening salvo in a campaign that would test not just my resolve but the very definition of family loyalty. The call from my mother came less than 24 hours after Derek's visit. I was in the garage organizing tools when my phone rang, and I immediately sensed the impending storm from her terse greeting. Ryan, we need to discuss what happened with your brother yesterday. No, hello. No, how are you? Just straight to Derek's grievances, which I quickly realized had been significantly embellished in transmission. Mom, whatever Derek told you. He said you laughed in his face when he asked for help. She interrupted, her voice taut with disappointment. He said you told him he was worthless and didn't deserve a nice place to live. The complete reversal of what actually happened left me momentarily speechless. That's absolutely not what happened. He demanded to live in my house, the house I just bought, while I move out. That's completely unreasonable. He's not asking forever, just until he gets back on his feet. You have options, Ryan. You and Hannah haven't even moved in fully. You could stay with her, or rent a small place temporarily. The casualness with which she suggested I abandon my new home was stunning. Mom, I've spent 12 years saving for this house. I'm not giving it up because Derek can't hold down a job. So your career success is more important than your brother's well-being? Than family? Her voice cracked theatrically. I didn't raise you to be this selfish. The conversation deteriorated from there, with my attempts at explaining reality dismissed as excuses. By the time we hung up, she had made her position clear. My refusal to help Derek was evidence of some fundamental character flaw, a failure of family duty that she found deeply disappointing. My father called that evening with a similar message, though his approach was more direct. Son, sometimes we need to make sacrifices for family. Your brother is struggling, and you're in a position to help. Dad, I've worked incredibly hard for what I have. Why should I give up my house when Derek hasn't worked for anything? That's unfair. Your brother has had different challenges. Like what? What exactly has prevented Derek from holding a job or paying his bills? His sigh carried decades of enabling behavior. Not everyone is wired like you, Ryan. Derek needs more support. And I don't? You've never once acknowledged how hard I've worked, how much I've sacrificed. But I'm supposed to give up my house because Derek wants it. Nobody's saying forever. Just until he gets back on his feet. Right. And when has that ever happened before? The conversation ended with my father's disappointed silence, a familiar response that once would have devastated me. Over the next week, the pressure intensified. Aunts and uncles called with concerns about my sudden change in attitude. Cousins sent messages suggesting I'd become materialistic and forgotten where I came from. My grandmother, usually my one ally, left a voicemail saying she was praying for my heart to soften. Derek had masterfully positioned himself as the victim of my supposed success-driven callousness, and most of the family accepted his narrative without question. Few bothered to ask for my perspective, and those who did seemed to have already decided I was wrong. The daily barrage of calls and messages created a constant undercurrent of stress. I found myself checking my phone with dread, wincing at family names on caller ID, and composing defensive texts only to delete them unsent. Sleep became elusive as conversations replayed in my mind, accompanied by all the perfect responses I never managed to articulate in the moment. Work suffered as my concentration fractured. During a critical client presentation, I mixed up key figures, earning a concerned look from my manager. Project deadlines loomed while my productivity plummeted. In quiet moments at my desk, I found myself staring at property websites, irrationally considering if I should just sell the house to escape the conflict. Hannah witnessed my deterioration with growing concern. One evening, after I'd spent an hour on the phone with my mother only to end up apologizing for things I hadn't done, Hannah gently took the phone and set it aside. "This is destroying you," she said, taking my hands. "I think we need to step back from wedding planning until this situation resolves. I'm not going anywhere, but I don't want our beginning to be overshadowed by this toxicity." Her suggestion, though reasonable, triggered a panic that surprised us both. "Are you having second thoughts about us?" "God, no. Never." She wrapped her arms around me. "I love you more than anything. But I'm worried about what this is doing to you, to us. They're using the wedding as leverage, knowing it's important to you. I'm suggesting we take that leverage away temporarily." She was right, of course. Derek and my parents were experts at identifying and exploiting vulnerabilities. The wedding provided the perfect pressure point, a significant event where family absence would be conspicuous and painful. That night, lying awake beside Hannah's sleeping form, I confronted an uncomfortable truth. I was allowing people who had never supported my growth to sabotage my happiness. I had spent decades seeking validation from those fundamentally incapable of providing it, and now that pattern threatened to cost me the future I'd worked so diligently to build. Yet knowing this intellectually didn't ease the emotional turmoil. When a text from Derek arrived the next morning. "Time's running out, bro, hope you've made the right decision." My heart raced with anxiety despite my rational understanding of his manipulation. The lowest point came during a Sunday video call with my parents. Derek sat between them on the couch, a visual representation of their unified front. "We're very concerned about your attitude lately," my mother began, as Derek nodded solemnly beside her. "This isn't like you, Ryan." "What's not like me?" "Standing up for myself?" "You're right, that is new. See how he talks to us now?" Derek interjected, placing a comforting hand on our mother's shoulder. "Success has changed him." I watched my mother lean into Derek's support, my father nod in agreement, and something inside me finally broke. Not in collapse, but in clarity. I was never going to win this game because the rules were designed specifically for my failure. No achievement, no sacrifice, no explanation would ever be enough. "I have to go," I said quietly, and ended the call. Sitting alone in my dream home, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and carefully chosen furniture, I felt utterly isolated. The future I had envisioned, holidays with extended family, Sunday dinners, nieces and nephews playing in the backyard, seemed suddenly impossible. I had built this house as a gathering place, a foundation for the family Hannah and I hoped to create, but also as a bridge to the family I already had. Now that bridge was burning, and I didn't know how to save it without sacrificing everything else. That evening, staring at the ceiling, I realized I had reached a crossroads. I could continue attempting to reason with people committed to misunderstanding me, or I could accept that sometimes preserving your self-respect means letting go of relationships that require its surrender. Neither option offered comfort, but only one offered the possibility of growth. What I couldn't yet see was that this painful recognition would become the first step toward an unexpected liberation. Hannah, witnessing my spiral into anxiety and self-doubt, took action. Without telling me first, she scheduled an appointment with Dr. Melissa Chin, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. When she finally mentioned it over dinner, my initial reaction was resistance. "I don't need therapy," I insisted. "I need my family to be reasonable." "You can't control their behavior," Hannah countered gently. "But you can get perspective on it. Just one session." "For me," I agreed reluctantly, more to appease Hannah than out of any real belief it would help. Dr. Chen's office was warm and understated, lacking the clinical sterility I'd expected. She listened intently as I explained the situation, interrupting only for clarification. "What you're describing is a common family pattern," she said after I finished. "The roles were established early, you as the responsible achiever, Derek as the troubled one needing help. Those patterns don't change easily because they serve a purpose for everyone involved." "What purpose could this possibly serve for me?" I asked skeptically. "The achiever role gave you a way to earn love and approval, even if it never quite worked. It became your identity, the responsible one who sacrifices. Meanwhile, your parents get to feel needed by Derek, and Derek gets continuous support without accountability." Her analysis was uncomfortably accurate. Throughout my life, I had tried to earn love through achievement, believing success would finally make me worthy of the approval so readily given to Derek. "The current conflict is threatening because you're stepping out of your assigned role," she continued. "By refusing Derek's demand, you're disrupting a dynamic that, while dysfunctional, is familiar and comfortable for your family." Over the next hour, Dr. Chin introduced concepts that illuminated a lifetime of confusion. Emotional manipulation, enabling behavior, parentification, boundaries. Each term clicked into place like puzzle pieces, creating a coherent picture of my family's dysfunction. "What do I do now?" I asked near the end of our session. "You need to decide what boundaries you're willing to enforce, recognizing that people accustomed to crossing them won't respond well initially. But boundaries aren't about controlling others, they're about clarifying what you will and won't accept in your life." I left that session with a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The sadness came from finally accepting that my family might never be where I needed them to be. The liberation came from understanding that their limitations weren't my failure. Hannah and I spent the evening talking through what healthy boundaries would look like. We decided I would compose an email to my family explaining my perspective clearly and firmly, without the emotional reactivity that characterized our recent interactions. The email took hours to craft. I explained my journey, the years of work, sacrifice, and planning that led to purchasing the house. I clarified that while I loved my family and wanted to maintain our relationship, I would not give up my home to Derek under any circumstances. I acknowledged Derek's struggles but emphasized that enabling his dependency wouldn't help him long term. I concluded by expressing hope that we could find a way forward based on mutual respect. The responses varied widely. 2 cousins sent supportive messages, acknowledging the pattern of favoritism they'd observed for years. An aunt I'd always been close to called to apologize for jumping to conclusions. My grandmother left a voicemail saying she was proud of me for speaking my truth with love. From my parents and Derek, however, silence stretched for 3 days. When it finally broke, it was my father calling to arrange a family meeting at their house that weekend. "Everyone needs to air their feelings," he said. "Your mother's very upset." The old Ryan would have immediately apologized for causing distress, regardless of whether it was warranted. The new Ryan, fortified by therapy and Hannah's unwavering support, simply said, "I'll be there." Hannah offered to accompany me, but I decided to go alone. "This is something I need to handle myself," I explained. "But knowing you're here supporting me makes all the difference." The drive to my parents' house that Saturday was both familiar and strange. The tree-lined streets of my childhood neighborhood hadn't changed, but my perspective had shifted dramatically. The house that once represented comfort now loomed as an arena for confrontation. My mother answered the door with a tight hug that felt more performative than affectionate. My father shook my hand formally. Derek sat in the living room, looking simultaneously defiant and victimized. The stage was set for the predetermined narrative. Prodigal son returns to be chastised for his selfishness. "We're glad you came," my mother began once we were all seated. "This family tension isn't good for anyone, especially with your wedding approaching." "I agree," I said carefully. "That's why I wanted to explain my position clearly in my email." "Yes, we read that," my father interjected. "But words on a screen can't replace face-to-face communication. We need to talk this through as a family." What followed was less a discussion than a coordinated intervention. My mother expressed disappointment in my changed values. My father emphasized family obligation and sacrifice. Derek maintained wounded silence, occasionally sighing dramatically or shaking his head at my responses. I listened patiently, waiting for an opportunity to speak. When it finally came, I took a deep breath and centered myself. "I understand you're disappointed in my decision," I began. "But I need you to understand something important. This house represents more than property to me. It represents 12 years of sacrifice and discipline. It's the foundation for the family Hannah and I hope to build. Asking me to give it up isn't a reasonable request." "Nobody's asking forever," Derek interjected, his first direct contribution. "Just until I get established. You've always been the lucky one, Ryan. Everything comes easy for you." Something about this familiar refrain, the dismissal of my effort as luck, the rewriting of my struggle as ease, finally broke through my diplomatic reserve. "Easy? Are you serious?" My voice remained calm but carried an unfamiliar edge. "Let me tell you about easy, Derek. Easy is having parents who celebrate your every minor achievement, while ignoring my major ones. Easy is never facing consequences for your actions. Easy is having family bail you out of every self-created crisis while I solved my own problems." The room fell silent, my parents exchanging uncomfortable glances. "For as long as I can remember," I continued, "I've been expected to accommodate Derek's needs while mine were treated as optional. I worked 2 jobs through college while Derek dropped out and faced no consequences. I lived in a studio apartment with second-hand furniture for years while saving, while Derek drove new cars he couldn't afford. I built my career through consistent effort, while Derek quit every job that required actual work. That's not fair. My mother protested weakly. Isn't it? When have you ever held Derek accountable? When have you ever expected him to stand on his own? When have you ever acknowledged my achievements without immediately changing the subject to Derek's needs? My father shifted uncomfortably. We've always been proud of you, Ryan. We just didn't think you needed the encouragement as much. You were always so capable. Everyone needs encouragement, Dad. Everyone needs to feel valued. I spent my entire life trying to earn the approval you gave Derek freely, and it was never enough. Derek's face had reddened with indignation. Oh, poor successful Ryan with his perfect job and perfect house and perfect fiancé. Life is so hard when everything works out, isn't it? Things worked out because I made choices and stuck with them. I accepted reality instead of blaming others for my problems. I took responsibility instead of expecting bailouts. You think you're so much better than me. Derek snarled, standing abruptly. Mr. Perfect who never makes mistakes. You know what? You can keep your precious house. I wouldn't want to live in a place tainted by your self-righteousness anyway. This isn't about being better than you, Derek. It's about living with the consequences of our choices. And my choice is to keep the home I worked for years to afford. Fine. Whatever. Derek's affected nonchalance slipped as his voice rose. I'll figure something out. I always do. And when I get my own place, it'll make yours look like a dump. I've got investors looking at my business plan for a property management company. 6 figures, guaranteed. Then we'll see who's asking who for help. The slip was so transparent that I initially thought I'd misheard. Property management company? You've never mentioned that before. Derek faltered momentarily before recovering. It's new. Very exclusive opportunity. What kind of property management? High-end rentals, he said vaguely. Premium short-term leases. The pieces suddenly connected. You weren't planning to live in my house, were you? You were going to rent it out. Derek's expression confirmed my suspicion before he could deny it. My parents looked confused. Derek, what is he talking about? My mother asked. Nothing. He's making things up to distract from his selfishness. No, I don't think I am. The clarity was sudden and complete. You wanted my house so you could list it on Airbnb or something similar. That's why you specifically wanted this house in this neighborhood. It would command premium rates. That's ridiculous. Derek scoffed, but his eyes darted nervously. Is it? Then explain exactly what this property management company involves. Explain these investors who are somehow interested despite your non-existent business experience and credit history. Derek's face contorted with rage as his plan unraveled. So what if I was? At least I'd be doing something productive with the place instead of playing house with Hannah. The admission stunned my parents into silence. For the first time, they witnessed Derek's manipulation without the filter of their protective instincts. You lied to us, my father said quietly. You said you needed a place to stay. I do. But why shouldn't I make money from it too? Ryan has everything, and I have nothing. Is it so wrong to want to level the field a little? In that moment, watching my parents' expressions shift from confusion to disappointment, I felt no victory, only sadness for the years lost to this dysfunctional dynamic. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the confrontation. I'm done, I said simply. I've spent my life trying to earn approval that should have been freely given. I've explained myself, defended my choices, and accommodated unreasonable demands. I'm not doing it anymore. I walked to the door, turning back briefly to add, I love you all, but I won't set myself on fire to keep Derek warm. When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation, I'll be here. The drive home was surreal, a mixture of adrenaline, grief, and unexpected peace. For the first time in my adult life, I had spoken my truth without apology or qualification. I had named the dynamic that shaped our family relationships for decades. Whether they chose to acknowledge it or not, the reality had been spoken aloud, and there was no returning to comfortable denial. Hannah was waiting on the porch when I pulled into our driveway. Without a word, she enveloped me in a hug that contained all the validation my family had never provided: acceptance without conditions, love without performance requirements. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. So incredibly proud. In that moment, standing in front of the home we had created together, I finally understood that I had always deserved good things. Not because I earned them through sacrifice and discipline, though I had, but simply because everyone deserves to be valued for who they are rather than what they provide. The realization didn't erase the pain of family conflict, but it offered something equally powerful: the freedom to build a life defined by authentic connection rather than obligatory roles. Whatever happened next, I would face it standing firmly in my truth rather than bending to accommodate the comfortable lies that had shaped our family for too long. The week following the confrontation passed in uncomfortable silence. No calls from my parents, no texts from Derek, no family group chat notifications. The absence of constant communication felt simultaneously liberating and disorienting, like removing a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. Hannah and I resumed wedding planning, choosing to focus on building our future rather than dwelling on family tensions. We selected a caterer, finalized the guest list, with my family members still included despite the uncertainty, and began addressing invitations. Each decision felt lighter without the shadow of familial judgment hanging over it. "Do you think they'll come?" Hannah asked as we sealed the invitation to my parents. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm extending the invitation regardless. What they do with it is their choice." The first crack in the silence came unexpectedly. My cousin Michael, who had always been close to Derek, called on a Tuesday evening. "I heard what happened," he said without preamble. "Derek's been telling everyone you threw him out on the street and said you never wanted to see him again." "That's not even remotely what happened," I sighed, preparing for another defense. "I know that," Michael said, surprising me. "Derek's been spinning stories our whole lives. I'm calling to say I believe your version, not his. And I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner about how they've always treated you." His support opened a small floodgate. My grandmother called the next day, then an uncle, then 2 more cousins, each offering similar messages of validation and apology. They had witnessed the pattern for years but accepted it as normal family dynamics. My confrontation had disrupted that acceptance, forcing a reevaluation of behaviors long taken for granted. 2 weeks after the confrontation, my mother called. Her voice sounded smaller, less certain than usual. "How are you?" she asked, as though we'd spoken yesterday. "I'm doing well," I replied cautiously. "How are you and Dad?" "We're..." She paused, searching for words. "We've been doing a lot of thinking, Ryan. About what you said. About how we've treated you compared to Derek." I remained silent, allowing her the space to continue. "I don't think we realized. We never meant to make you feel less valued. You were always so capable, so independent. We thought you didn't need the same attention Derek did." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm not saying we were right. Just trying to explain." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more self-reflection than I'd ever heard from her. We talked for nearly an hour, navigating the tentative beginnings of a more honest relationship. She asked genuine questions about my work, my house, my wedding plans, questions focused on my experience rather than how it compared to or affected Derek's. Before ending the call, she said something that lodged in my heart. "I'm proud of the man you've become, Ryan. Not because of what you've achieved, though that's impressive, but because of who you are, your integrity, your perseverance, your kindness despite everything. I'm sorry we haven't said that enough." My father called the following day. His approach was more straightforward. "I owe you an apology, son. We didn't realize how our actions were affecting you. We got so used to Derek needing more that we forgot you needed us too. These conversations weren't magical fixes for decades of patterned behavior. There were still awkward moments, still occasional slips into old dynamics. But they represented something profound, the possibility of growth, of new understanding between adults willing to examine uncomfortable truths. Derek's response took longer and followed a different path. 3 weeks after our confrontation, he moved out of our parents' house and into a shared apartment with a coworker. He found a job at a marketing firm, entry-level but with potential for advancement, and stuck with it. According to my mother, he was seeing a therapist, though he never discussed it directly with me. When he finally reached out, it was through a brief text. "You were right about some things. I'm working on my stuff. Not ready to talk more yet." It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, a small opening that might someday lead to a healthier relationship. I responded simply, "I'm proud of you. Take the time you need." As months passed, the acute pain of family conflict gradually transformed into something more nuanced, a mixture of cautious hope, clear-eyed acceptance, and strengthened boundaries. Some relationships deepened through honest communication. Others remained distant but respectful. A few family members chose not to engage at all, uncomfortable with the disruption to familiar patterns. Through it all, Hannah remained my constant support and reality check. When I slipped into old patterns of excessive responsibility or unnecessary guilt, she gently redirected me. When family interactions triggered old insecurities, she reminded me of my worth independent of their validation. Our wedding day arrived in early fall, exactly as planned. Standing in our backyard surrounded by friends and those family members who chose to attend, including my parents but not Derek, who sent a card but wasn't ready for big gatherings, I felt a profound sense of arrival. Not just at marriage, though that filled me with joy, but at a place of authentic selfhood. The house that had become the unexpected catalyst for family upheaval now stood as testament to something more important. The home Hannah and I were creating together, built on mutual respect, clear communication, and unconditional support. The physical structure mattered, of course. We loved its craftsman details and spacious rooms. But the foundation of trust we'd established mattered infinitely more. 6 months after our wedding, Hannah and I hosted our first major gathering, a holiday dinner that included friends and family members from both sides. My parents attended, bringing a housewarming gift they'd clearly put thought into selecting. Derek declined but sent a text wishing us well. The evening wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. No one pretending the past hadn't happened, but everyone choosing to build something better moving forward. Later that night, after guests had departed and Hannah had gone to bed, I stood in our living room looking at the photos from our wedding displayed on the mantel. Among them was a childhood picture of Derek and me, arms thrown carelessly around each other's shoulders, grinning with the unself-conscious joy of children who hadn't yet learned to compete for parental attention. In that moment, I realized the most important lesson from our family conflict. Real love doesn't demand sacrifice of selfhood. It doesn't require one person to diminish so another can shine. It expands to embrace each person's authentic being, celebrating differences rather than enforcing conformity to assigned roles. I had spent decades believing I needed to earn love through achievement or self-sacrifice. The painful journey of the past year had taught me that while this belief shaped my actions, it never defined my worth. The people who truly loved me, Hannah, the friends who stood beside us, the family members who chose honest connection, loved me for who I was, not what I provided or achieved. That understanding transformed how I viewed not just my relationship with my family but my relationship with myself. The drive for achievement remained, it was genuinely part of who I am, but it no longer carried the desperate edge of proving my worthiness. I worked hard because I valued excellence, not because I feared worthlessness without it. The house that Derek had coveted, that my parents had expected me to surrender, that had become the battleground for long-suppressed family dynamics, was now truly home, not because I had defended my claim to it, but because I had learned to inhabit my life authentically within its walls. Standing there in the quiet of our living room, I felt immense gratitude for the painful journey that led to this peace. Not every family conflict resolves perfectly. Not every relationship survives the transition from dysfunctional patterns to healthy boundaries. But the ones that do, the connection strong enough to withstand honest communication and necessary change, emerge stronger, deeper, and more nurturing than before. If you're struggling with family expectations or dealing with someone who can't respect your boundaries, remember that you deserve to honor your own needs. Having boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for healthy relationships. Has someone in your life ever made you feel guilty for your success or demanded sacrifices you weren't comfortable making? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles makes all the difference. Please like this video if you found my story helpful, subscribe for more content about navigating difficult relationships, and share with anyone who might need to hear that standing your ground doesn't make you a bad person. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you deserve good things, not because you've earned them, though you probably have, but simply because you are enough exactly as you are.